Welcome to the presentation done by Group 26 regarding the production of rice. During this presentation, we will be helping you understand the production of rice as well as the impacts it has on the environment, the economy, and the society. Now over to Shiran to explain to you the steps regarding the production of rice.
I'm here to talk about the stages of manufacturing in the rice production. There are 8 steps in the manufacturing process. It will include the steps, the stakeholders, how it's done, the purpose why it's done. And the first step is reaping. And it's done by the stakeholders who are farmers who work in the paddy fields, engineers who design the machines, and blacksmith who creates the metal equipments needed for the reaping. And the reason for this is to cut major crops from the field for the separation of rice from them. And it's done both manually using a scythe or sickle to cut the paddy and by machines such as the rice combine harvester. And the next step is threshing. It's done with farmers, engineers, and carpenters. The purpose is to separate the grain from the straw of the crop. And it's done by slamming sheaves against a table. Also, a combine harvester can be used in this process. The third step is sun drying. The farmers and engineers are involved in this process. The purpose is to reduce the grain moisture content to a safe level for storage. It's done by separating grain under the sun on mats. And storaging the dry paddy seeds will be the next step, which is done by the factory workers and engineers. The purpose for this process is to prevent grain loss, and it's done by storing grain in an airtight container so that the moisture content will remain the same as when it was sealed. And cleaning and destoning, this is the 5th step of the process. It's done by the factory workers and engineers. This step is done to remove unwanted materials such as dust, sand, clay, and other materials from the grain. It's using a combination of winnowing with a fan to remove light particles and stones. In this rice manufacturing process, rice dehusking is an important step in it. The factory workers, engineers, and farmers are some of the persons who involved in this process. The purpose of this step is to separate the husk from the grain and obtain white rice. In some of the new technology machines, milling is also done at the same time. When we apply the paddy seeds in the machine, the husk is removed by friction as the paddy grains pass between 2 abrasive surfaces that move at different speeds. And rice grading. The 7th step is rice grading. It's done by factory workers and the engineers. The purpose is to assess the quality to make sure that the grain is of uniform size and weight. It's done by this can be done using gravity tables and length graders. And the final step is packaging. Factory workers and engineers are some of the stakeholders who are involved in this process. The purpose is making the product ready for marketing and making different size of packets based on expectations of buyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiran. Now I will be explaining everything regarding task 2 and task 3. So let me start by explaining the inputs and outputs of our production process while using a flow diagram. Our first step is reaping. In reaping, we have a few inputs, which are iron ore, fossil fuel, and manual labor. After the reaping process, we do obtain a few outputs, which are the paddy which has been freshly separated from the field and carbon dioxide due to the use of mechanical equipment. Then our next step is threshing. For threshing, we have a few inputs, which are paddy crops, fossil fuel, and manual labor. After threshing, we obtain a few outputs, which are the rice grains with impurity and moisture, the straw of paddy, and carbon dioxide. Threshing is the process where basically you smash the paddy against a wooden box with slots, where the rice grains will fall into these slots and the straw of paddy will be separated. That's why we have included them as two separate outputs. Now moving on to the next process, sun drying. In sun drying, we have a few inputs, which are the grains of rice with moisture and impurities, sunlight, mats used to lay grains in the sun. Of course, because we are trying to reduce the moisture percentage of the grains from 25% to 14%. Why? Because we need, when it comes to storing rice safely, it needs to be at 14% moisture level. And of course, the outputs, dried rice grains. Then going to the storage step. In the storage step, we have the dried rice grains, which we have dried in the previous step. We have IRR super bags and manual labor. And our output will be the grains stored in airtight container. The airtight container is the IRR super bag, which prevents any new moisture or any other environmental factor affecting our freshly packed, freshly stored rice. Now moving on to the next step, cleaning and destoning. So in cleaning and destoning, the inputs are grains with impurities, fossil fuel, and manual labor. During this step, we make sure to clean the grain and remove as much as impurities as possible. So the outputs we will get is rice without impurities, the separated impurities, and carbon dioxide. Then we have rice dehusking. The inputs of that would be the rice with husk and fossil fuel, and the outputs will be the dehusked rice grain, the empty husk of rice, and carbon dioxide. Then we have rice grading. So when it comes to rice grading, the inputs we have are the dehusked rice grain, the fossil fuel, and manual labor. Then after the process, we obtain a few outputs, which are the rice of different qualities, after our grading, of course, and carbon dioxide. And then in the packaging step, we have the inputs, which are the HDPE packing bags, fossil fuel, and manual labor. After we, of course, pack the rice, our outputs will be packed rice in bags. Then the transport step. So in the transport steps, our inputs will be fossil fuel to power the vehicle and manual labor for the driver. And the outputs will be the rice, the packed rice in bags being stored in shops, as well as carbon dioxide released while transporting these packed bags. Then during the consumption stage, their inputs are edible rice, and the outputs will be excretory matter after the food has been processed in our bodies. Then in the last step, we have excretion and recycling. So the inputs will be the excretory matter and the empty rice bags after, of course, we take the rice out and we make it. And the outputs will be the recycled empty rice bag, which we can use for different purposes, and compost. Now, I'll be moving on to explaining our system boundary. So we have only included the parts that directly involve the rice seed. So processes such as preparation of land, paddy transplanting, water management, weed control, and pest control are not a part of our system boundary, since they are involving the process before harvesting. So it doesn't directly relate to the seed of rice. Now, moving on to our functional units. We have three functional units. The first one is the kilograms of carbon dioxide released per production of 1 kilogram of rice. The second one is the land area used when producing rice. The third one is the amount of methane produced during the production of rice. So the most suitable one we selected out of these three is, of course, the land area, because it can be measured easily using satellite imaging, as you can see by the two images that appeared in front of you. The not suitable functional units are, of course, functional units 1 and 3, because they require taking measurements of gases from the atmosphere. Taking measurements of gases from the atmosphere is rather troublesome due to gases being affected by many external factors such as pressure and temperature. Now, I'll be moving on and handing it over to Pumi for her to explain the environmental consequences, social consequences, and economic consequences of rice production. Thank you.
I'm going to explain about environmental, social, and economical consequences of each step of manufacturing process of the rice production. The first step is reaping. In the reaping step, we can get as environmental consequences global warming and increased natural disasters due to gas emissions like CO2. Increased problems due to some diseases like dengue and destruction of properties can be taken as social consequences. Crops can be destroyed when not reaped at the appropriate time can be taken as economical consequences. In the second step, threshing, we can get as environmental consequences carbon dioxide gas emissions due to using fossil fuel and noise pollution. Increased problems due to some diseases like dengue and injuries may occur when working manually can be taken as social consequences. Loss of some percentage of harvest from tractor trading method can be taken as economical consequences. The third step, sunrise step, we can get as environmental consequences, environmental pollution. Open air sunshine can lead to rice contamination, and when people who eat that kind of rice will affect to health problems can be taken as social consequences. Loss of income when grains are destroyed by animals can be taken as economical consequences. In the storage step, as environmental consequence, we can get loss of ecosystems due to using large spaces. Difficulty in finding resources due to destruction of forests can be taken as social consequences. Increase in price of goods is a direct economical consequences. Cleaning and destoning step is also contribute to environmental pollution. Releasing impurities can cause environmental pollution. Difficulty to cover living expenses due to inflation can be taken as social consequences. Loss of income when rice grains are destroyed by machines like milling machines can be taken by as economical consequences. Rice dehusking. In rice dehusking step as environmental consequence, we can get generation of solid waste and soil and water pollution. Health problems caused due to consuming contaminated water can be taken as the social consequences. Loss of income when grains are destroyed by the skin machine can be taken as economical consequences. In the rice grading step is also releasing carbon dioxide gas to the environment. Adverse health effects in rice is not graded accurately can be taken as social consequences. If rice is not grading properly, it can cause to make problems with the price. It is the direct economical consequences. In the packaging step, last step, we can get as environmental consequence packaging materials gathering to the environment causing pollution. Increased health problems due to release of poisonous gas from improper disposal of garbage can be taken as social consequences. Loss of grains and packaging process leading to inflation is indirect economical consequences.
Thank you, Pumi, for helping us understand the environmental, social, and economic consequences of the production of rice. Now, moving on to the final stage of our presentation. As you may have seen during our presentation, we did explain that rice is a very important industry. Why? Because it supplies majority of the nutrients that humans require to survive and to grow. Rice production is typically larger in the eastern regions of the world. Much more popular, rice production is much more popular in those regions when compared to the other regions. But it does have, like we discussed in the slide before, certain environmental, social, and economic consequences. Therefore, whenever possible, we need to take steps to make the production of rice as sustainable as possible. So, in order to achieve this goal, the community has to be engaged and they need to also extend some sort of effort. Thank you for listening to our presentation.